Hi, I'm Daryl Kulak, and I'm here with Kevin Smith. We are both with Leading Agile Studios. And today we'll talk about 5 hidden impediments to your transformation. So nice to have you here, Kevin.
Nice to be here, Daryl. Thank you.
So, you and I have done a lot of transformation work together over the years. We've seen different situations where there are sometimes surprising things that happen to our customers when they're doing agile transformation, and we kind of combined it into these little five tips or five impediments that we've seen that people might not expect. In this session, we'll talk through those things and tell a few stories about the situations we've seen. So we can get started on number one. So number one is packaged software. So we're talking about SAP or Salesforce. Could be software as a service. Could be software that gets installed on internal servers. But that always is kind of an interesting thing when you're doing the transformation. A lot of the agile stuff that you see from the normal channels is about, if you're developing this new application, here's a great way to do it. You can do these stand-ups and you can do test-driven development. But what about packages? So, Kevin, what have you seen with package implementations that have started to get things a little bit off kilter with agile transformations?
Well, there's a couple things. When you're going through a transformation, you're usually trying to get to the point where you're decreasing your increments or decreasing your time to release, right? You're trying to increase your frequency of releases, trying to do shorter increments, and the overhead with package solutions and testing package solutions is definitely an impediment to more frequent releases. An example is, every single package solution, you have integration efforts, you have a lot of configuration work, you have a lot of customization that you do to those packages, and all of that work that was done up front when it was first installed needs to be retested every time there's a new version or a new patch or a new release of the package solution, and that can be very time consuming.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So a lot of it is about testing, isn't it? Like the package doesn't sit there in isolation. It's got integrations with other applications. It's got to, and it's got data that you have to have a data migration into the package in the first place when you install it, and then the data is going back and forth with those interfaces. So if the if you don't have like a testing strategy around that package software, between the integrations between your other applications and that package, then it's going to be tougher to have those frequent deployments and to even have like a continuous integration pipeline.
Yeah, it really is about finding those seams, is what we like to call it in testing, where you can, those integration points, where you can put that automated testing to protect your integrations, to protect your configuration of that software, and make sure that whenever you do a release, you're not spending weeks or even months manually retesting every single one of those points.
Right. Yeah. A lot of times, we walk in and the customer will say, well, we need a month or 2 months to be able to test, to do manual tests against those packages. And it seems like a lot of packages that the testing part, the automated testing part, is not their big focus. You may need to build your own testing framework uh, to be able to handle all the conditions that happen with that package and the integrations to the package.
Yeah, usually they've outsourced getting that package up and running in their environment, and building an automated test suite around that is at the bottom of the priority list. It becomes a problem later, push that problem to later when you need to do your first update or your first big release of new functionality, and then find out that you've got months before you can actually do that release.
Right, right. Yeah, the package vendor might say, well, we'll get a testing framework in phase two, but right now we're just focused on getting this package up and running. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And then what about upgrades to that software?
Yeah, yeah. The upgrades not just by the company, but by the vendor itself, right? Who you bought it from. They've got a release cycle. They've got um, their own process for when they which versions they still support, how long back those versions are. We've seen companies where they use a COTS or package solution, but because it's been so difficult to stay up to date with the releases, they're years back on versions that the vendor's not even supporting anymore, and they're on their own.
Right, and a lot of that's just because of testing. So we we don't want to move to the new version. Maybe there were a lot of customizations to the package, and so now we're going to have to redo all those customizations, and then how do we test it to make sure that it still works with all the rest of our application suite, right?
And they've gotten so out of date that it's they're so out of date on their updates that it's would take basically an entirely new effort to upgrade to the latest version, the same amount of work as it took the first time to install it in the first place.
Right, right, sure, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that was packages is number one with a bullet. Number two, the skills of your own staff. So go ahead. Okay, so packages, number one with a bullet. Number two, the skills of your own staff. So Kevin, what have you seen where the skills of the IT staff, the software development staff, where that can hold back a transformation?
Um, so usually, like, this is more about timing, right? So the impediment with skills is, it's not possible to wave a magic wand and everybody in your team or your company has all of the new skills that you want post transformation. It can take months or years to change the way people work. They might eventually get there, but it's probably not in alignment with your transformation roadmap schedule. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I think what we see a lot. We'll walk in to a customer, and one of our first questions is often, what percentage of your IT budget do you devote to run versus what percentage to build? And often the percentage is 80% run, 20% build. So if we're adding agility to this organization, and that's the existing kind of you know the budget, then we're giving agility to 20% of that organization. And so the way to expand that, to have maybe 50% uh, of your budget towards build, or even 80%. I mean, we like it to be 20% run and 80% build. The way to do that is that the software is more maintainable, doesn't take so much time to fix defects, doesn't take so much time to test, and so your staff needs to have those skills, the automated testing skills, test driving, continuous integration. So all the things that can speed up not just the build part of it, but also the maintain part of it, that can take less and less of your budget. So have you seen situations where we've been successful with kind of changing that ratio?
Yeah, because you're transforming, at a very simplistic level. You're increasing your releases, right? You're trying to reduce your time to market. So from an engineering perspective, there's a lot of things that string pulls. So once you say, okay, we want to do more frequent releases, or we want to get these features out instead of quarterly or every 6 months, and we want to get them out every week or every day, there's a lot of engineering skill difference between releasing once a quarter and releasing once a day that you've got to pull into practice here. And it's a skills at an individual and team level. All the things you mentioned, the continuous integration, automating everything that is currently done manually, the software engineering skills for doing test-driven development, doing pairing, the way you do code reviews, and then actually looking at your architecture. Can you support the higher frequency in the technical architecture of what you've implemented? And all of that comes back down to the skills of your people to be able to implement that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking of some situations where we've gone in, we've worked with a customer, and studios has the ability to build applications for the customer, build it with the customer. So in either of those situations, often that software will go into production. I'm thinking of one situation in particular. The software that we built, this is the team you and I were both on, uh, that that went into production, and we were working with that customer on multiple applications. So we're still there a year later after this had gone into production, and the customer said, it was a 40 hour maintenance load, and so we were like, okay, so that's one full-time person for the last year that you had to do to maintain and fix defects and things. And the customer was like, no, that was 40 hours to maintain the application over the course of the whole year. So it sometimes I think it sounds like magic, like when we're talking about continuous integration and TDD and pairing and all these things for better quality software. But it can be a dramatic shift in the amount of time it takes to maintain that software if your variables are named properly, your methods and classes are small. There's so many things that you can do to make that software more maintainable to the extreme.
Right, and to bring it back around to the skills aspect, the the people that are doing that maintenance, or the people that are creating that software, need the skills to accomplish that. Um, that 40 hours a year maintenance instead of 40 hours a week maintenance, and some of it gets to changing the way you're hiring people too.
Right, right, right. And that sorry. Right, and that's something also that we've done with customers is there is a coaching aspect to it. So um, a lot of times we see agile coaches, and they will maybe come in 20 hours a week. One coach will work with 4 teams, all that kind of stuff. That's not our preferred coaching model. So instead, we want the coaches. I sometimes think of like a swimming coach. You don't want the coach standing outside the pool. You want the coach in the pool. Or sometimes we say, like, we want the coaches to be right there in the muck with the software teams. It's just a different way of coaching. first of all, there's more respect for the coach because your butt is on the line along with the whole team to get the next release done. And a lot of the kind of the coaching uh, advice that a coach can give if they're not in the muck is a little bit too naive, you know? Uh, well, you should do this, you should do this. This is what worked at the last client. I'm sorry, but it doesn't work here. And so if the coach is really on the team and really helping to produce velocity, then that coach will not make those, naive, will not provide that naive advice to the team. And that's a big part of a good coaching model, I think.
Yep. And another one that may sound counterintuitive at first is apprenticeship programs of bringing people early in their career. So we're talking about skills. So these might be, less skilled people earlier in their career, but sometimes it's a lot easier to take early in career people and teach them your way of working than it is to untrain someone who's mid-level in their career and then try and give them the new skills. So getting that apprenticeship program set up and functioning to bring people up into your transformation and your way of working is really helpful as well.
Right. We've had one customer basically established relationships with local colleges and just said, we'll take X number of, pretty big company, we'll take X number of college grads and then we'll put them through this apprenticeship program, often like a 6-month apprenticeship program, that you're kind of, they come out of college with kind of the good foundation of skills, and then you're teaching them here's what work is like at this company. And so after that 6 months, now you've got somebody who didn't have to unlearn all their bad habits, and who just was starting fresh right out of college, doing test driving, doing CI, doing pairing, as if that's completely normal to them. And sometimes that can be easier, and it's probably not the only thing to do, but it will really help kind of provide this fresh set of skills into your existing teams of people who just see this as this is normal. Like this is how I've always done it because I just got out of college 6 months ago. Yeah, I love that. I love when our customers do that. Okay, so that was number 2, skills of your own people. Number 3 is external vendors. So we talked about vendors with packages, but often you just have vendors for variable staffing. And we did another podcast on variable staffing for Agile Transformations as well. But Kevin, what have you seen where like a vendor of IT services can actually also be an impediment for a transformation organization?
Well, in a transformation, whether it's process or technical coaching, we're happy to bring whoever along for the ride to the outcome that we're trying to produce. But if those people that we're bringing along for the ride are contractors through some other vendor, and then we get this team up to speed and they're functioning and operating the new way, and then the vendor rotates the people out from under the company, that was a pretty big waste of time and money. So and I think we have run into that at clients where we've worked alongside other vendors, and really increased the skills of those people because we worked right alongside them, gave them new skills, and then they moved on. And it was great for the vendor and great for the people, but it wasn't really helpful for the company itself. So yeah, being careful as to who you're bringing along in this transformation, and factoring that in at the beginning, and pushing your vendors to either retrain their own people or provide people with the skills that, with the skills already in place for your transformation, or maybe you have to switch vendors.
Right, right. We've seen a number of different situations. So in some cases, our customer, the organization that's doing the transformation, will say, yeah, we'll train our vendors. I mean, a lot of companies won't do that because it's kind of seems counterintuitive. But just to get past this transformation, we will train some of our vendors as well. And for the companies that don't do that, you can also talk to the vendor and say, so let's say they a vendor has maybe 50 teams in India. Maybe 5 of those teams have those agile skills. So they do test driving, they do continuous integration, they know what that means, they are familiar with it, have experience with it. And then the other 45 teams are waterfall teams. So if you're with one of those other sets of teams within that vendor, you can ask, can we switch this over to one of your agile teams? And sometimes that's been possible with our customer organizations. Um, so we've also seen situations where the customer will work with the vendors and renegotiate the contract so that the vendor is on the hook to supply what the customer needs within the context of their transformation. Excuse me. So so the so in the contract, it may say that we want to see new tested code every 2 weeks for sprints. So we're not saying you have to do sprints, but we are saying we want to see that code every 2 weeks. We're not saying that you have to do test-driven development, but we do want all of these automated tests that we can run once you ship the code, once you give the code to us. So there are things that you can do in the contract with those vendors that not necessarily says, vendor, you have to do agile, but this is the minimum what we need from you in order for us, for the the customer of the vendor, for us to be able to have agility across what we're doing. And then finally, this often happens too, is that the customer is just going to need to switch vendors. So this vendor is not able to do this. They're not willing to train their own people. They sometimes, like, they put labels on top of their waterfall lifecycle, like, yes, we do sprints. How long are your sprints? Our sprints are 6 months long. Yes, we do test-driven development, but only when it makes sense, which is only 5% of the time. There's kind of all of these excuses that vendors can give to try to sell the deal, but they can't really fulfill on it. So in those kind of situations, the customer will say, that's not the vendor we need. And then they switch to another vendor. Could be Leading Agile Studios, could be any other, or consulting firm that has those same skills and is able to provide those same services and that same level of quality and speed that you would expect from your own agile teams in your own organization. You want to expect that from the vendors as well.
Exactly. Yeah, it's about producing the necessary outcomes. It's not necessarily about TDD, although you want compatible work styles between your people and the vendors that you work with. But from a contract perspective, it's about producing the same outcome that your transformation is trying to produce.
Right. I'm thinking of one situation. We had a team of about 120 people, and part of the team was us, and then part of the team was other vendors, kind of a patchwork of vendors, and it was a common code base. So our team would build the software, would have all the automated tests, make sure that everything's running green, and then that component would get shifted over to another vendor team, and they would just let all the tests run red, and just kind of forget about it because that was not their own work style. And so you got to get past that in terms of your vendor relationships if you really want this agility, if you want to increase code quality, if you want faster speed to market, all of those things. The vendors have got to be on board as well, at least in some minimal way. And if that needs to be contractual, then that's something we can help with. Okay, so vendors was number 3. Number 4, career paths. So how have you seen career paths become an impediment? It sounds kind of strange, right? How have you seen career paths for IT people become an impediment to a transformation, Kevin?
Well, this is kind of related to the skills one. It's skills, but from the company's perspective instead of the individual's perspectives, and it's about how do you measure people, right? So people in your company have goals for the quarter, goals for the year, to advance their careers, and it's based on some sort of measurement that you've mutually come up with that person. Um, do those measurements actually align to the new way that you want to work after the transformation? I could think of one example where we were doing a project at a bank and we wanted to automate all of the security testing in the CI pipeline that we were building, and we couldn't understand the opposition that we were getting from the security team and the security architects as to why they wanted to own this piece manually as opposed to letting us automate it and take the load off of them. And the reality is it came down to the way that they were being measured. So for us to take this workload off and automate it for them, went in opposition to their goals for that year, for their own careers and for the way they were being measured. So yeah, you definitely need to watch out for those types of things, and it's usually hidden, right? This is an impediment. It's usually hidden. You're not going to necessarily be able to clear all of these out of the way ahead of your transformation, but be aware that they do exist. And then when you do come across them, be ready to pivot on career paths and goals for people so that they can be realigned to the transformation outcomes.
Right, right. I'm thinking of a particular couple of developers that we worked with, and the developers were just all about all this stuff. I'm learning new things. I'm learning how to test drive. I'm learning the solid principles and all these things with our coaching. And then one day they came into work and they were kind of like not the usual happy self. And we found out that it was because they had their performance review, and in the performance review, they were judged on all these things that were kind of antithetical to what we needed them to do with agility. And so, even though they were personally kind of on board with these things, when it came to the performance review, they got downgraded because they were doing the wrong stuff according to those measurements. And it's pretty common. So we've had situations like with unionized developers and IT staff. For instance, in the union agreement, it may say that that if you are a certain level of IT worker, that you need to have a 10 by 12 cubicle with walls at least on 3 sides, which is going to hurt when we try to move to an open space. That you maybe like a lines of code. How many lines of code have you written? Kind of metric. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can get in the way of those developers, even if they're on board, even if they're loving it. They will still get knocked down and maybe not get promoted, maybe not get a raise because of the way that the career paths are structured. So our approach, leading Agile is a transformation organization. So we want to go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, it seems like an outdated example or a meme, but yeah, if you measure developers for the lines of code you produce, you're going to get code bases with exponentially more complexity than what's actually needed. So I don't know how many companies are still measuring lines of code that developers produce, but it's still happening in different forms today of measuring tasks and hours instead of results and outcomes.
Right, right. So, leading Agile being a transformation organization, we look at those things like career paths first before we do that pilot project, before we do the, whatever you want to call it, lighthouse project, because if you've got, if the customer has developers working on that engagement, on that product, those people may get downgraded because of their involvement with this. So, however excited they might be, it might be a detriment to their career, and we might not find that out for 6 months until their next performance appraisal. But at that point, they're gonna be upset that they joined this pilot team, which is not what you want. So yeah, it's important to transform those career paths before getting into doing the pilot project and making sure that those people are not going to get punished for being part of this innovation. So career paths number 4. Whoops, do my fingers. Career paths are number 4. Number 5. This is a big one, which is lack of automation. So Kevin, what have you seen in terms of lack of automation that could be an impediment to I think we saved the biggest one for the last here, didn't we? Lack of automation in terms of an impediment to transformation.
Yeah, and this kind of covers, we definitely covered this in some of the previous points, but a transformation that's heading towards more frequent releases, shorter increments, anything manual in your process, whether it's manually getting your code into production or manual test efforts, is going to be an impediment here. Environments, simple things like onboarding developers and getting their environment set up. We still quite regularly run into companies where it takes weeks, it's measured in weeks just to get a new developer up to speed and their environment set up to start producing outcomes on a project. And that in today's world, that should be measured in minutes or hours at the most, not in weeks. So it's not just automated testing, but it's automating all of the things, automating your environment setup, automating your developers' environments, to have that whole DevOps mindset where the team is responsible for everything end to end, as opposed to the handoffs and the manual QA and the manual testing. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just not. I don't want to say it's not possible, but it's not. And I don't want to say it's not easy. It's somewhere in between that. It's very difficult to have any kind of agility if you've got um, either lack of testing automation, lack of developer onboarding automation, or lack of environment automation. So we talk about push button automation in DevOps. If I can't just push a button and create a new environment, if I can't just push a button and run all of the tests against this application, then continuous integration is going to be very difficult. Continuous deployment. So the things that the foundation of agility is being able to get business value out there quickly with quality, and that's without that foundation of automation in all of those places, that's a very, very tough thing to do. I want to say impossible, but probably probably somebody's done it.
It's definitely going to reduce your frequency, right? So if you're pushing for continuous deployment and you haven't automated your security testing, um, you can't push stuff out. So if any one piece is missing, whether it's some sort of QA testing or actually setting up your environment or getting your code into a production environment, or doing smoke testing, doing your security analysis tests of your code base or the application itself. It's really creating that backlog of all the things that are not automated between developers writing code and the feature being in production, and then starting to chunk off in a priority order those pieces and automating them. And it pulls pulls back the threads we've been talking. Is that in the skill set of your people? How do your package solutions work in that type of environment? Are your vendors going to support those initiatives with the right skills? So, this is kind of a summary of our previous points. Is automate all the things is what it gets down to.
Right. So a lot of times we talk to customers, Kevin, and they'll say, "We don't have time. We've got these deadlines. Our teams are all busy. We just don't have time to put those tests in." Um, and I think part of it is they're looking at it as an expense, not an investment. And so what we see like consistently is that investing those dollars into automation, all those different kinds of automation, environment, developer onboarding, testing, that just pays back very, very quickly. So in those cases, what we offer is that studios can help with that, creating that automation. So we can be writing the test scripts, we can be getting all of those things automated. When we join a team and it takes a couple of weeks for our developers to get onboarded, we immediately write that down and say, hey, can we help you with that? Because you've got these new contractors coming on, you're hiring these new employees. Everybody's going to take 2 weeks to get started. Wouldn't you like it if they were productive on the first day? And so we offer to do that for our customers as as a service that we can help to build that automation to make that happen. And we did it. I think like we had it not necessarily as expensive as you'd think. So we did that with one customer, and it was like one of our developers for a few weeks, and they changed the onboarding time from, I think it was like a week and a half down to a couple of hours. It just was just like last month that occurred. Okay, so that's fine.
I was going to add one more point to the lack of automation, and that's we say it's automate all the things, but there's definitely a focus on a business capability here too, from a prioritization standpoint. If you have software that you really are only changing a couple times a year, it may not be worth automating every aspect of that release. But focusing on business capabilities where you are trying to be more competitive in the market, is that's where you're prioritizing your automation focus.
Right. I think that's another thing that holds people back is you're telling me I need automation in all these areas. It's overwhelming. Where will I start? I'll just push that off till next release. So getting past that overwhelm is focusing in on, and like you said, business capabilities. So there are certain business capabilities where there's a lot of change and it's a competitive advantage for you. So let's zone in on those things where you're having those problems, where you're seeing those defects. Let's get those done first because that'll be the biggest payback, and then we can worry about other types of automation. We have one concept that we call the campsite rule, which is just as developers are maintaining existing code, legacy applications, just as you go in and fix that defect, add a test, have the test fail, fix the defect, the test passes, and now you've got another maybe unit level automation, test automation that you didn't have before, and you're just, the more that happens, you are getting automation in the places exactly where you need it, because that's where the defects have been occurring. So there's all these different strategies, but get past the overwhelm of, oh, I need this automation, strategy. I need to invest millions of dollars. Yeah, probably not. You can probably get started in a few high-profile areas that are going to give you a really big return on investment.
And once it's aligned to people's career paths and skill sets, and your vendors are doing these things, it just becomes the new way that you work, and it's no longer an issue.
Exactly right. So we had five hidden impediments to transformation. Number one was packages. Number two was the skills of your own staff. Number three could be your vendors. So if they are not able to kind of keep up with you, then they may hold you back. Number four was the career paths of your own people. And then number five, big one, just lack of automation in all those different areas, and not getting overwhelmed, and figuring out where to start with it and how to get the best return on investment. So thanks a lot for joining me, Kevin. This has been great and a lot of fun. Yeah, we can wind it up, and thanks to everybody for watching.